The hum of the city outside our penthouse window usually soothed me. Tonight, however, it felt like a discordant symphony, a reflection of the unease that had settled in my bones. Elena, my wife, my supposed partner in life, was late again. Working late, she'd said, her voice a little too high, a little too quick, as she'd rushed out the door. It was the same excuse she'd used 3 times this week, and a knot of suspicion tightened in my stomach with each repetition. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7. Our life together had been, from the outside, a picture of success. I had built a thriving tech company from the ground up, a testament to my ambition and drive. Elena, with her effortless grace and charm, was the perfect complement to my driven personality. We had a beautiful home, lavish vacations, a comfortable life. But lately, something had felt off. A subtle shift in the atmosphere between us, an almost imperceptible coolness in her touch, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name in her eyes. It was like a beautiful painting that had developed a hairline crack, almost invisible, but undeniably there. I tried to shake off my worries. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. Elena was a busy woman, after all. She had her own career, her own passions. It wasn't fair of me to question her every move. But the feeling persisted, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind, a seed of doubt that had taken root and begun to sprout. I paced the living room, the polished marble floor cold beneath my bare feet. I glanced at the framed photos on the mantelpiece, Elena and I on our wedding day, beaming with happiness. Elena accepting an award for her charity work. Elena and I laughing on a beach in Bali. They were snapshots of a life that felt increasingly distant, a life that seemed to belong to someone else. I wondered if the man in those photos, the man with the easy smile and the confident gaze, would even recognize the man I had become, a man consumed by suspicion, a man haunted by the fear that the woman he loved, the woman he had entrusted with his heart, was betraying him. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the picture-perfect life we had built together was about to shatter. I knew, deep down, that I needed to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The lateness stretched on, each passing minute amplifying my anxiety. Elena's usual, "I'm on my way," text hadn't arrived. I found myself staring at my phone, willing it to light up with her name, but it remained stubbornly dark. The silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a stark reminder of the relentless passage of time. I tried to distract myself. I poured a glass of scotch, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal tumbler, but the familiar warmth did nothing to soothe my unease. I picked up a book, a thriller I'd been meaning to read, but the words blurred on the page, unable to hold my attention. My mind raced, conjuring up worst-case scenarios, each one more disturbing than the last. I imagined Elena in a car accident, lying injured in a hospital bed. I imagined her meeting with another man, laughing, holding hands, sharing secrets that were meant for me. The images were like shards of glass, piercing my heart with their sharp edges. The suspicion that had been gnawing at me for weeks now felt like a living, breathing thing, a malevolent presence in the room. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth. The thought of confronting Elena directly crossed my mind, but I dismissed it. I knew she would deny everything, spin a web of plausible excuses, and I would be left with nothing but my own doubts and insecurities. I needed proof, concrete evidence that I could no longer ignore. It was then that I remembered the security cameras I had installed in the apartment a few months ago, ostensibly for security purposes, but now I knew for something far more sinister. I had never actually checked the footage, telling myself that it was a mere precaution, a way to protect our home. But now, a dark impulse took over me, a desperate need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I went to my study, the room where I kept my computer and the security systems monitor. My hands trembled as I typed in the password, the anticipation building to a fever pitch. The screen flickered to life, displaying a grid of images from the various cameras in the apartment. I clicked on the recording for the living room, the night Elena was working late. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the playback. Elena came into the living room, not dressed for work, but in a silk robe. She poured herself a glass of wine, then sat on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her open the door, not to a colleague, but to a man I recognized, David, my business partner, my supposed friend. They embraced, not in a friendly way, but with a passionate intensity that made my stomach churn. They kissed, a long, lingering kiss that sent a jolt of pain through my entire being. I watched in stunned silence as they moved to the bedroom, the camera capturing every intimate detail of their betrayal. I felt like I was watching a nightmare unfold before my eyes, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. I wanted to look away, to shut my eyes and pretend it wasn't happening, but I couldn't. I was frozen, transfixed by the horror unfolding on the screen. And then, the worst part, it wasn't a one-time thing. The recordings revealed a pattern of infidelity, a parade of different men entering our home, our sanctuary, while I was at work, trusting that my wife was waiting for me. Each new revelation was like a fresh wound, each betrayal a stab in the heart. My world, the world I thought I knew, the world I had built with Elena, was crumbling before my eyes. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard fury. I felt a surge of rage, a primal instinct to lash out, to break something, to inflict pain. I wanted to confront Elena, to scream at her, to demand answers. But a deeper, more calculating instinct took hold. This wasn't just about anger. It was about justice, about retribution. Elena had shattered my trust, violated our vows, and made a mockery of our marriage. She had not only betrayed me, but she had also betrayed the very foundation of our life together. I wouldn't let her get away with it. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain, my vulnerability. I would make her pay, and I would make her pay dearly. I spent the rest of the night watching the recordings, replaying each scene of betrayal, memorizing every detail. The more I watched, the colder my resolve became. I wouldn't simply divorce her and move on. That would be too easy, too merciful. No, I would make her suffer. I would destroy her world, just as she had destroyed mine. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan as intricate and as cold-blooded as the betrayal I had witnessed. I would use my intelligence, my resources, my connections, to systematically dismantle Elena's life, piece by piece. I would expose her infidelity, ruin her reputation, and alienate her from her friends and family. I would make her regret the day she ever met me. I poured myself another glass of scotch, the alcohol burning a path down my throat. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself from outside my body. The man I had been, the man who loved Elena with all his heart, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a man consumed by a single-minded purpose: revenge. I knew that what I was planning was wrong, that it was dark and twisted, but I didn't care. The pain of betrayal was too great, the thirst for vengeance too strong. I would become the architect of Elena's downfall, the instrument of her destruction. And as I sat there, in the silence of my study, the city lights reflecting in my cold, hard eyes, I knew that there was no turning back. My first target was David. He was the easiest, the most obvious choice. Not only had he betrayed my trust by sleeping with my wife, but he had also violated the sanctity of our business partnership. He had proven himself to be disloyal, untrustworthy, and utterly undeserving of my friendship or my respect. I began subtly manipulating the company's finances, diverting funds, creating false invoices, and planting evidence that pointed directly to David. I was careful, meticulous, leaving no trace of my involvement. I knew that David, with his arrogance and his sense of entitlement, would never suspect me. He would be too busy enjoying his illicit affair with Elena to notice the trap I was setting for him. Weeks turned into months, and the evidence against David mounted. I watched him closely, observing his growing unease, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He became withdrawn, distracted, his performance at work slipping. I knew that the net was closing in, that it was only a matter of time before he would be exposed. The day finally came when I anonymously tipped off the authorities. The investigation was swift and brutal. David was arrested at his office, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and a host of other financial crimes. His reputation was shattered, his career in ruins. He was stripped of his position in the company, his assets frozen, his life turned upside down. I watched his downfall from afar, a cold satisfaction growing within me. It was only the first step in my plan, but it was a significant one. David had paid a heavy price for his betrayal, and it was only the beginning. The others would follow, each in their turn, each facing their own unique form of retribution. I would make sure of it. With David out of the picture, I turned my attention to Marco, the personal trainer. He was a different kind of challenge, a vain and shallow man whose life revolved around his physique and his conquests. He wouldn't be susceptible to the same tactics that had worked on David. I needed a different approach, something that would strike at the core of his being, something that would shatter his carefully constructed image. I began by discreetly gathering information about Marco's past. I hired a private investigator to delve into his background, uncovering a series of indiscretions, half-truths, and outright lies. It turned out that Marco's certifications were falsified, his experience exaggerated, and his reputation built on a foundation of deceit. I also discovered that he had a history of inappropriate behavior with his clients, a pattern of crossing boundaries and exploiting his position of power. Armed with this information, I launched a carefully orchestrated campaign to discredit him. I anonymously leaked his past indiscretions to the gym's management, along with fabricated complaints and allegations of misconduct. I also spread rumors among his clients, subtly undermining their trust in him. The effect was devastating. Marco's carefully cultivated image crumbled before his eyes. He was fired from the gym, his reputation in tatters. He tried to find work at other fitness centers, but the rumors had preceded him. He was blacklisted, his career effectively over. I watched his descent with a grim satisfaction. He had used his charm and his physique to manipulate and exploit others, including my wife. Now he was paying the price for his arrogance and his deceit. His downfall was a testament to my power, my ability to control and manipulate events from behind the scenes. It was a heady feeling, a dangerous sense of control that fueled my desire for revenge. I had tasted blood, and I was hungry for more. Carlos, the concierge of our building, presented a different set of challenges. He was a hard-working immigrant, devoted to his family, and seemingly content with his simple life. Unlike David and Marco, he wasn't driven by greed or ego, which made him a less obvious target for my vengeance. However, his unwitting participation in Elena's web of deceit, providing a safe haven for her clandestine encounters, made him complicit in my eyes. I couldn't simply ignore his role in my pain. I decided to take a more subtle approach with Carlos. I started by befriending him, engaging him in casual conversations, offering him small favors, and gradually gaining his trust. I learned about his family, his dreams, his fears. I discovered that he was an undocumented immigrant, his visa having expired years ago. He lived in constant fear of deportation, a fear that I decided to exploit. One evening, I anonymously contacted the immigration authorities, providing them with detailed information about Carlos's status and his place of work. I knew that it was a cruel blow, a devastating consequence for a man who had done nothing more than provide a service to the residents of our building. But my desire for revenge had clouded my judgment, blinding me to the collateral damage of my actions. Weeks later, Carlos was apprehended at work. He was detained, processed, and deported, leaving his family behind, his dreams shattered. I watched his world crumble with a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. I had exacted my revenge, but at what cost? I had destroyed a man's life, a family's future, all in the name of a twisted sense of justice. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge of the pain I had inflicted. Yet, the relentless engine of my vengeance pushed me forward, demanding further retribution. Elena was still out there, oblivious to the consequences of her actions, and I wouldn't rest until she had paid the ultimate price. While the wheels of my revenge were turning, Elena remained blissfully unaware. She continued her charade, her late nights, her whispered phone calls, her carefully constructed lies. She seemed to have no inkling of the storm that was brewing around her, the carefully orchestrated chaos that was about to engulf her world. I played my part to perfection, the devoted husband, the concerned partner, the oblivious victim. I listened to her excuses, her fabricated stories, her feigned affection, all the while suppressing the rage that simmered beneath the surface. I watched her with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a lab rat in a maze, fascinated by her obliviousness, her utter lack of awareness. I continued to share her bed, to eat meals with her, to maintain the facade of our marriage. It was a perverse game we were playing, a macabre dance of deception and betrayal. I knew that each day that passed brought me closer to my ultimate goal, the day when Elena's world would come crashing down around her. But there was also a strange satisfaction in prolonging her ignorance, in allowing her to believe that she had gotten away with her treachery. It was like watching a predator stalk its prey, savoring the anticipation of the kill. I knew that the longer I waited, the more devastating the blow would be. Elena had grown complacent, secure in her web of lies. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was about to give way, that the life she had so carefully constructed was about to crumble into dust. And I, the man she had betrayed, the man she had underestimated, would be there to witness her downfall, to savor her despair, to revel in her destruction. My next move was more insidious, aimed at isolating Elena, stripping her of her support network, leaving her vulnerable and alone. I began with her friends, those who had listened to her fabricated tales of work stress and marital woes, those who had offered her sympathy and support. I subtly planted seeds of doubt, dropping hints of Elena's infidelity, exaggerating her flaws, and painting her in an unflattering light. I used social media to my advantage, creating fake profiles, spreading rumors, and manipulating online conversations. I knew that gossip travels fast, that whispers can be more damaging than shouts. I watched as Elena's friendships began to fray, the bonds of trust eroded by suspicion and doubt. Her friends became distant, their phone calls less frequent, their invitations fewer. Elena, sensing their withdrawal, became increasingly isolated, her once vibrant social life dwindling to a handful of superficial acquaintances. Then I turned my attention to her family. I exploited existing tensions, magnifying disagreements, and subtly turning her loved ones against her. I played the role of the concerned husband, confiding in her parents about her supposed emotional instability, her erratic behavior, her growing distance. I knew that they, like her friends, would be more inclined to believe the man she had vowed to love and cherish, the man who had always presented a picture of stability and success. Elena's relationship with her family deteriorated, the once warm and supportive connections strained by mistrust and suspicion. Her parents, once her biggest cheerleaders, became wary, their love tinged with disappointment and disapproval. Elena, stripped of her friends and family, her support network crumbling around her, became increasingly reliant on her lovers, the very people who were contributing to her downfall. She was trapped in a web of her own making, a web that I had carefully woven, a web that was slowly but surely tightening its grip. With Elena increasingly isolated, I turned my attention back to her lovers. They had played their part in my wife's betrayal, and they would not escape my wrath. I had already destroyed David's career and Marco's reputation, but I wasn't finished with them yet. I wanted to inflict pain on a more personal level, to shatter their illusions of happiness and security. I began by gathering information about their personal lives, their partners, their families, their vulnerabilities. I hired private investigators to follow them, to photograph them, to document their every move. I delved into their social media accounts, their online activities, their digital footprints. I discovered their secrets, their hidden desires, their deepest fears. Armed with this knowledge, I launched a series of anonymous attacks, designed to expose their infidelity and cause maximum damage to their relationships. I sent compromising photos and messages to their spouses and partners, revealing their betrayals in excruciating detail. I created fake online profiles, spreading rumors and innuendo, fueling suspicion and mistrust. I watched as their lives began to unravel, their relationships strained by the weight of their deceit. David's wife, a woman I had always admired for her strength and loyalty, filed for divorce, taking their children with her. Marco's girlfriend, a young and naive woman who had believed his lies, was heartbroken and humiliated. The other men, each in their turn, faced the consequences of their actions, their lives disrupted, their reputations tarnished. I observed their suffering with a cold detachment, a sense of grim satisfaction. They had played a part in my pain, and now they were paying the price. Their misery was a testament to my power, my ability to manipulate and control, to inflict pain and extract revenge. And yet, even as I reveled in their downfall, a part of me felt a twinge of guilt, a flicker of doubt. Was I any better than them? Was I becoming the very thing I despised? While the chaos I had unleashed swirled around Elena and her lovers, I continued to gather evidence of her betrayal. Every lie, every clandestine meeting, every whispered phone call was meticulously documented. I installed more hidden cameras in our apartment, capturing her every move, her every indiscretion. I intercepted her emails, her text messages, her online conversations. I built a dossier of her infidelity, a testament to her deceit, a weapon to be used at the opportune moment. I watched her with a cold, analytical eye, noting the subtle changes in her behavior, the growing anxiety, the flicker of fear in her eyes. She was starting to sense that something was wrong, that her carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. But she couldn't pinpoint the source of her unease, the invisible hand that was orchestrating her downfall. I, her husband, the man she had betrayed, remained her constant companion, her confidant, her rock. I listened to her concerns, her fears, her suspicions, offering words of comfort and reassurance, all the while fueling her paranoia, pushing her closer to the edge. The dossier grew thicker, the evidence more damning. It was a perversely satisfying project, a meticulous record of Elena's treachery, a testament to my own meticulousness and my unwavering determination. I knew that the time was coming when I would unleash this weapon, when I would expose her lies to the world, when I would watch her world come crashing down around her. And as I added each new piece of evidence to the dossier, I felt a growing sense of anticipation, a dark excitement for the final act of my revenge. The stage was set. The players were in position. It was time for the final act, the culmination of my elaborate plan, the moment I had been waiting for with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I decided to use Elena's upcoming birthday as the backdrop for my revenge. I sent out invitations to a surprise party, not just to her friends and family, but also to her lovers and their significant others. I rented a lavish ballroom at a downtown hotel, hired a caterer, a band, and a photographer. I spared no expense, creating an illusion of celebration, a mask for the devastation I was about to unleash. On the night of the party, I arrived early, ensuring that everything was in place. I had a large screen set up at the front of the ballroom, connected to a hidden laptop. On the laptop, I had loaded the dossier, the meticulously compiled evidence of Elena's infidelity, along with the most damning footage from the hidden cameras. As the guests began to arrive, I greeted them with a smile, playing the role of the gracious host, the loving husband. Elena was the last to arrive, radiant in a red dress, oblivious to the trap that had been set for her. She was surprised and delighted by the party, her eyes sparkling with happiness. I watched her with a mixture of pity and contempt, knowing that her joy was about to be shattered. Once everyone was assembled, I took the stage. I raised my glass and proposed a toast to Elena, praising her beauty, her intelligence, her kindness. Then, with a dramatic flourish, I announced that I had a special surprise for her. I dimmed the lights and turned on the screen. The first image that appeared was a still from the hidden camera footage, showing Elena and David embracing in our living room. A collective gasp filled the room. Elena's face turned pale, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The images continued, one after another, revealing her infidelity in graphic detail. The room erupted in chaos. Accusations flew, tears streamed, and relationships shattered. Elena's world, the world she had so carefully constructed, crumbled before her eyes. The ballroom became a scene of utter pandemonium. Elena's carefully curated life, her web of lies and deceit, unraveled before her eyes, and the fallout was spectacular. Her friends, those who had offered her sympathy and support, now recoiled in disgust, their faces etched with betrayal and disappointment. Her parents, their faces pale with shock and shame, looked at her with a mixture of sadness and reproach. Her lovers, caught in the spotlight of their own infidelity, scrambled to defend themselves, their excuses and denials drowned out by the rising tide of anger and recrimination. David's wife, her eyes red with tears, launched into a furious tirade, her voice filled with pain and betrayal. She hurled accusations at both David and Elena, her words cutting through the air like daggers. Marco's girlfriend, pale and trembling, simply stared at the screen, her face a mask of heartbreak and disbelief. The other men, their faces contorted with shame and fear, tried to slink away, but the crowd wouldn't let them escape. They were surrounded, bombarded with questions, accusations, and insults. Elena, the epicenter of the storm, stood frozen in the spotlight, her face a canvas of shock, shame, and despair. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect wife, the devoted friend, the dutiful daughter, had shattered into a million pieces, leaving behind a hollow shell of a woman, exposed and vulnerable. The room was filled with a cacophony of voices, a symphony of anger, pain, and betrayal. Relationships imploded, friendships dissolved, and trust evaporated. The party, intended as a celebration, had become a public execution, a brutal spectacle of Elena's downfall. And I, the architect of this chaos, the orchestrator of this destruction, watched it all unfold with a cold detachment, a sense of grim satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment of truth, the moment of reckoning. Elena had paid the price for her betrayal, and the world she had so carefully constructed had crumbled around her. The chaos in the ballroom swirled around me, a tempest of shattered illusions and broken hearts. I watched Elena, her face a mask of devastation, as the full weight of her actions crashed down upon her. The shock had given way to a raw, visceral pain, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding, for forgiveness. But there was no understanding, no forgiveness to be found in that room, only the bitter taste of betrayal and the cold reality of her lies. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, a silent question hanging in the air. Did she expect me to comfort her? Did she think I would offer her solace after what she had done? If so, she was mistaken. My heart, once overflowing with love for this woman, was now a barren wasteland, devoid of any warmth or compassion. I had achieved my revenge. I had exposed her infidelity, ruined her reputation, and destroyed her world. I had meticulously planned and executed my retribution, and now the moment I had craved for so long had arrived. But as I watched Elena's world crumble, as I witnessed the pain and humiliation etched on her face, the victory felt hollow. The satisfaction I had anticipated failed to materialize. Instead, I was left with a gnawing emptiness, a profound sense of loss. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built my life with was gone. In her place stood a stranger, a deceiver, a betrayer, and the life we had shared, the life I had cherished, was nothing more than a mirage, a carefully constructed illusion that had vanished in the harsh light of truth. The revenge I had sought had brought me no solace, no peace. It had only amplified the pain, the emptiness, the profound sense of loss. I had won, but at what cost? I had destroyed Elena, but in doing so, I had also destroyed a part of myself. The air in the ballroom was thick with tension, the silence punctuated by the occasional sob or gasp. I couldn't bear to witness the carnage any longer. The sight of Elena, broken and defeated, filled me with a strange mixture of triumph and despair. I had achieved my goal, but the victory tasted like ashes in my mouth. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage, the shattered remnants of a life that had once been filled with love and promise. I didn't look back, didn't offer any explanations, didn't say goodbye. I simply walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and out of Elena's life. The city lights blurred as I walked, the noise of the traffic fading into a distant hum. I felt numb, detached, as if I were floating through a dream. The events of the evening replayed in my mind, a surreal montage of shock, anger, and despair. I had orchestrated this chaos, this destruction, and yet, I felt no sense of satisfaction, no sense of closure. The pain of Elena's betrayal still lingered, a raw wound that refused to heal. I had exacted my revenge, but it had brought me no peace, no solace. Instead, it had left me with a profound sense of emptiness, a chilling realization that revenge, no matter how meticulously planned, could never truly heal a broken heart. I walked for hours, my thoughts swirling like the autumn leaves that danced around my feet. Where was I going? What was I going to do? I had no answers, no plans. My life, once so carefully structured, so meticulously planned, was now in shambles. I had destroyed my marriage, alienated my friends, and severed ties with my business partner. I had nothing left, no one to turn to. I was alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, haunted by the ghosts of my past. The days that followed were a blur. I moved out of our penthouse apartment, leaving behind the remnants of a life that no longer existed. I sold the company, severing the last tie to my former life. I packed a few belongings, withdrew a substantial amount of cash, and disappeared. I left no forwarding address, no contact information, no trace of my whereabouts. I wanted to vanish, to erase myself from the world that Elena and I had shared. I wanted to start over, to create a new identity, a new life, free from the pain and the memories that haunted me. I traveled for months, drifting from city to city, country to country. I stayed in cheap motels, ate in greasy diners, and avoided any contact with the people I had known. I was a ghost, a shadow, a man without a past. The pain of Elena's betrayal gradually subsided, replaced by a dull ache, a constant reminder of what I had lost. The memories of our life together, once so vivid, so cherished, began to fade, like old photographs exposed to too much sunlight. I tried to forget, to bury the past, but it clung to me like a shroud, a constant reminder of my own complicity in the destruction of my happiness. I eventually settled in a small coastal town, thousands of miles away from the city where my life had imploded. I rented a modest apartment, found a menial job, and kept to myself. I avoided relationships, friendships, any kind of emotional connection. I was afraid to trust, afraid to love, afraid to be hurt again. The revenge I had sought had come at a steep price. It had not only destroyed Elena's world, but it had also shattered my own. I had become a hollow shell of a man, haunted by the ghosts of my past, forever marked by the scars of betrayal and the chilling realization that revenge, no matter how sweet, could never truly fill the void left by a broken heart.